GRUVN recently released a thermoform line of paddles, the MUVN series. We're going to cover both of their current offerings, the 16X and the 13S. But for now, let's start off with the elongated 16X. It's a unibody thermoform paddle with a Toray T700 carbon fiber surface and dimensions of 16.5 inches in length, 7.35 inches in width, a 5.5 inch handle, and a 16mm core. Now, if you're familiar with the original GRUVN 16X, you'll notice that the shape is different now. It no longer has that rectangular shape and now sports an arrow curve at the top. It's actually slightly different dimension-wise from other elongated paddles too. For starters, the width is slightly narrower since most elongated paddles are 7.5 inches in width. The other difference is how rounded the arrow curve at the top is. Most arrow curve paddles like the Rhombus R1 Pulsars are higher at the top of the paddle and then curve down sharper on the sides compared to the MUVN-16X, which is a tad bit more flat at the top and the curves on the side aren't as sharp. In case that didn't make any sense, here's the two side by side so you can see what I'm talking about. So how does this slight difference in shape and dimensions separate this paddle from other arrow curve elongated paddles? Well, in terms of the swing weight, they're nearly identical. The R1 Pulsar is listed at 117, while the MUVN-16X is listed at 118. The R1 does have a slightly wider sweet spot, which I noticed when I used the MUVN-16X. I had felt that the 16X wasn't as forgiving on the sides of the paddle, which was why I ended up pulling up the specs on the website and noticing the dimensions were slightly narrower. However, because the top of the paddle doesn't curve as sharply down, there is a bit more weight distributed up there, making the sweet spot more forgiving near the top and giving the paddle a bit more plow through on drives. In short, I would describe this paddle as having a sweet spot and a baseline drive power level of a rectangular elongated paddle, while having the swing weight of an arrow curve paddle, but at the cost of a slightly thinner sweet spot. Spin was fine just like all the other Toray T700 thermoform paddles, and it had good pop as well. The paddle face wasn't as stiff as something like a Vatic Pro Flash, and was around average for face stiffness amongst the thermos. Overall, it's a solid elongated paddle addition to the thermoform market that I had no issues with. Now onto the smaller MUVN-13S. Like the 16X, it's also a unibody thermoform paddle with a Toray T700 carbon fiber surface, but the dimensions are 15.7 inches in length, 8.1 inches in width, a 5.3 inch handle, and a 13mm core thickness. I classify this as that standard shape, though it is slightly shorter in length at 0.3 inches less and more curved around the corners, making the paddle surface area actually smaller. So the 13S has been getting lots of positive reviews lately for being a very fast paddle at the net that has good spin, good touch, good pop, and a solid sweet spot. While I do agree with all of the above statements about the 13S, I also do not think this paddle is for everybody. I personally was not a fan of the paddle. I definitely appreciated it and thought it was a fun paddle to use, but for what I personally like in a paddle, this one was definitely not for me. I had a tough time adjusting to the shape and didn't feel that it benefited my game. While I do generally prefer elongated paddles, prior to reviewing the 13S, I'd actually been using the standard shape paddles in the Yola Scorpius and the Sword and Shield J3. Now I actually think those are better options and would appeal to more people because of the bigger paddle surface area, which makes the paddle more forgiving. While the 13S is very quick in the hands with a swing weight under 100, my main issue with it was the smaller paddle face, which I found hard to use in firefights, and I would occasionally clip the edgeguard more than usual. Now I do know this is something I could remediate by drilling more and playing with the paddle more, but when I used the more traditional standard shape paddles, I didn't have the same issue and felt like I didn't mind sacrificing that bit of speed for more paddle surface area. That said, I still think the 13S is a very fun and interesting paddle that definitely does have a market. It's a paddle perfect for people who come from a ping pong background, and if you are someone who really enjoys having fast hands at the kitchen, the 13S has enough speed and pop to be perfect for you. Otherwise, I do think the more classic standard shape paddles like the Scorpius and J3 are more forgiving, yet still with enough speed, pop, and control that they would appeal to a broader audience. Overall, I think both the MUVN paddles are very fun and unique paddles in the thermoform market. While the 16X is a very solid elongated paddle, the 13S is a very fun speedy paddle that players will enjoy using in firefights at the kitchen. If you do want to check these paddles out, I've linked my discount code here and in the video description below that will get you 10% off your order from the GRUVN website.
You're talking to the camera. Should say something about David and Coy.
Hi, David and Coy.
It's not weird. Yeah, I know, right?